determined to be a material weaknesses, or which finding that we determined to be significant deficiency. We are more than happy to say that on the federal grant, we did not have any findings relating to your CDBG grant compliance. So that's why under the federal award that we did not identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiency, and we are issuing an unmodified opinion on your major federal program, which is the CDBG program. And then also starting on page 10, 2018-001, we have all the detail, the criteria, the condition that we find, and then also the causes to the problem. So we actually did list out very detailed on page 10 on accounting policy and procedures, page 11 on the city's finance organization, and then page 12 on the internal controls over journal entries process. So those are very, very comprehensive in terms of how we draft out our findings.
I'm looking for that in the document that I have here.
Sure.
So, I mean, I see page 10, and it is.
It's not in the agenda, it's in the handouts.
It's this report, not the big report.
If you could email me that.
Sure.
I will.
I have a question. What's our legal obligation in dealing with this tonight?
This is just on for receive and file. If you have questions about it, then you won't receive it tonight. You'll bring it back at a regular date or another date for you to ask the questions of your finance director and your auditor.
So do I have to make a motion to do that, or can we just provide direction?
You would provide direction because you're not going to make a motion to receive it.
Then let's do that. Let's provide direction to bring it back after we've had a chance to go over all of it. I agree.
And
So,
could I ask a
sure.
question of my colleagues on council? Is there an interest in having a document? Pat Gregory has gone through this, has questions and comments. Is there value added to our review and discussion if she would be willing to provide a copy of her document review?
I would think so. Why not?
Agreeable to that?
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
So the direction is bring this back after we've had some time to digest it and come up with our own questions and concerns that we have, and go from there. So there's no motion we need on this, except that Ms. Gregory will. In addition, Ms. Gregory will add her comments, or provide her comments or her findings to us.
Send it email.
If you would, please. Thank you.
Yes. No motion. You've given direction to the city manager, and you've invited a member of the public to provide her concerns. You would only have a motion if you were rejecting this. You're not rejecting it. You're deferring it, so you have time to read it and formulate questions.
And if I might suggest, if you would email your comments to the city attorney, that way city attorney can distribute.
Sure.
And city manager?
Oh, yeah. Great idea.
City manager?
Sure.
Okay.
They'll distribute it to us. Sure. Okay. Thank you.
Just trying to avoid a Brown Act concern.
That's true.
I wasn't trying to bypass our city manager.
Okay.
Could we get the questions ahead of time so we can make sure that we have the answers that you need to them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So, Council, how much time do you think you'll need to digest this and provide finance with some questions that you may have? I'm looking right at you, Linda.
I know you're looking at me. I'm thinking.
So what's the consensus of the council?
First meeting in June.
First meeting in June. So if we provide provide them at least, how much time do you need, Lorena?
Depends on how many questions there are.
That was my answer.
Okay, so.
A couple of weeks probably is my guess.
Okay, let's shoot for a couple weeks, because we do know that there's a budget. A couple things going on right now, trying to complete the budget, so.
May I suggest one thing, because governmental accounting financial report is very, very comprehensive and very complicated. So may I suggest that we actually have a workshop that I'll come and present the whole entire CAFRS, walking from the beginning to the end, so that make sure everybody understand, because I can hear your allegations on some numbers didn't reconcile, but we actually do go through thorough quality control review in these financial statements. That may help you in understanding these financial statements more thoroughly.
I think the workshop is a great idea.
Yeah.
So agreed? Yes, no? Okay. We have consensus of 4.
Allocate any time for that? Because you know an hour from now.
Well, if we can get our questions in ahead of time, I'm more interested in the questions than hearing all of it.
Well, and then, you want to make that statement?
Yeah, I think it's really largely dependent upon the council's availability to either meet earlier or at a different time, to have a specific time where we can primarily discuss this item. I think that's probably the best thing. So we just single this item.
Okay, 5 o'clock, you said?
Okay.
Okay. That'll give us a couple hours.
2 hours?
Yeah. Yeah, light agenda and no other presentations.
Got it.
Okay. All right, we'll let you know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, with that, we move on to item number 22, General Plan Progress Report. I'm going to say this for probably one last time, Community Development Director Eliana.
Thank you so much. Sorry. I know it's late, and thank you for indulging me, because sometimes we really don't assess a lot of where we're at and what we've accomplished, and I really think we have accomplished a lot with the general plan since it was adopted. So
This should have been the first item.
yes, just go over it as quick as I can.
No, you take all the time you need. I just said for the public to hear it, it would be a nice thing.
So state law actually requires that cities prepare an annual progress report on the general plan. Most cities don't, quite frankly. We do engage in an annual report on the housing element. That is required, and we do that to stay in compliance, and also take part in general plan surveys. So what the legislation says is that the report should be approved by the City Council and then submitted to the State Office of Planning and Research and Housing and Community Development. So after the report presentation tonight, if you agree, then we'll ship it off to those agencies. So this report is a bit of a catch-up. It's from 2012 to 2019. And as I mentioned, the primary legislative component in the reporting is the housing element, which we are in compliance with. So our general plan was adopted in 2012 and is comprised of 11 elements and an implementation plan. To date, there have been 8 amendments to the general plan, 6 of which were city initiated for the same kind of things like we did tonight. From 2012 to 2019, the city approved 29 housing-related projects with a combined 3,784 potential single-family and multifamily units. And the reason I bring that up is because a big emphasis in the new next cycle housing element is that cities are resistant to development and not approving housing, and that's, why we have a crisis. So clearly the city has been approving and processing development projects to result in that amount. However, a total of 527 single-family building permits and 3 multifamily building permits were issued during that same time frame, which indicates that there are market conditions and other things at operation other than, a reluctance to approve housing or new development. So accomplishments to date. So in the general plan, we were quite ambitious. There were 216 implementation programs identified in Chapter 12. And to date, we've accomplished 88, have been either completed, are in progress, or are ongoing programs. In progress means the project was initiated with an anticipated completion date, and ongoing means that it's part of our fabric already in terms of how we're doing our daily operations. So of those 88, I'm not going to list them all, I just pulled out what I thought were some key components. The general plan consistency zoning project that we just completed a couple of months ago, multiple updates to our zoning code over time. The downtown Hemet specific plan was prepared and adopted. We have a specific plan ordinance. The West Hemet annexation of 1,000 acres was completed. The groundwater management plan, the master drainage plan update is underway. The climate action plan, improving and streamlining development review processes. Another one. The airport land use plan, general plan amendment that we just did tonight. The Hemet Rocks programs and ordinances. You may recall there were 19 ordinances as part of that program, addressing mostly public safety as well as property maintenance and other things. Our rental registration and inspection program. The 5-year capital improvement program, infrastructure and facilities funding, building code updates, police department strategic 5-year plan, the fire department standards of coverage, and its 5-year plan. So in terms of the regional housing need accomplishments, this is kind of hard to see, hard for me too. Let me look at my other paper here. Okay, so as you may recall, some of you were on the commission before when we did the Cycle 5 updates, we really pushed back in terms of our numbers. So they went from 12,000 to 604. And of that, they're allocated in these very low, moderate, and above moderate categories. So to date, the city of Hempstead in that cycle period has accomplished about 50% of our RENA allocation, with the majority being in the moderate and above moderate. We haven't been able to construct anything, the 134 units in the very low, and most cities don't. It's almost impossible unless you have a subsidized project. So when the state took away redevelopment and took away our $9 million of low mod funds that would be used towards housing, we didn't even have something to leverage towards housing or provide an incentive to an affordable housing. So it's no mystery to me that cities cannot construct affordable housing if you don't have those funding sources. However, one of our greatest needs was in above moderate, which is different from a lot of different agencies, that we do have a considerable amount of lower income housing and really saw a need for more of the above moderate. So looking forward now, there are some new state legislation that will require additional amendments and updates. One is a new environmental justice element. This was adopted in 2016 under SB 1000. This requires, so various communities throughout the state of California have been identified as a disadvantaged community. It doesn't mean the whole community, it's a portion. I'll show you the map. It's intended in this environmental justice element to address air quality, food access, safe and sanitary homes, physical activity, public facilities, and civic engagement. So they have some very specific components in this new element that need to be addressed. Then SB 1035, adopted in 2018, the public safety element update. As other general plan elements are updated, we are supposed to be updating information related to flood, fire, and other climate hazards. A lot of that information has been prepared as part of our climate action plan and adaptability, so I think that there's a lot that we can already utilize. And then, yay, the housing element cycle 6 is around the corner with even more requirements, reporting requirements, and yes, lots of good stuff for 2017 and 2018. And that housing element update is due in October of 2021. So we have a little bit of time. So this map shows what's designated as the disadvantaged community area. So basically, it's not a very good map. This is from the state's website, but it's from roughly Palm to Santa Fe, from west to east, and then north of Whittier to Esplanade, and continues up into San Jacinto. So it's that area to where the environmental justice element needs to address those components.
So you don't, I know the state, considers severely disadvantaged versus disadvantaged, and I was under the impression that our MHI is more on the severely disadvantaged versus disadvantaged.
And it may be from an income standpoint. These are just the ones in terms of this legislation that they identified as disadvantaged and needing the environmental justice. So here, in looking at some of the other implementation programs in the general plan that the city has not undertaken yet, and these are just from planning standpoint as to what we think are important ones to maybe embark upon in the next couple of years or so as funding permits. One would be an economic development strategy and marketing plan, incorporating the sustainable tourism. We started some of that. Business outreach and retention program, and my goal is business park and industrial and getting some skilled jobs, and I think we've been talking to some businesses that we think will be making some new investments here in town. Citywide design and landscape guidelines, we think SB2 grant program might be an avenue to do that, as well as some of the housing element costs. The updated the development impact fees, your interim city managers mentioning that in his item coming up. Updated the Quimby Act ordinance for parks. This is woefully out of date and really needs to be updated. MSHP minor amendment for Warren Road. In order for us to expand Warren Road to even what its general plan designation is, we have to do what's called a minor amendment to the MSHP. So we've had a couple of meetings with RCA, and we have another one on Thursday to advance this for the city. Employment opportunity zones promotion. A lot of cities, and I think there was an article in Western Cities magazine this last month about some of the promotional activities that cities are doing, since we have two actually fairly large opportunity zones, one in the downtown area and one in Southwest, that we can take some. In fact, I had a developer contact me yesterday asking about areas within the Southwest Opportunity Zone and what the zoning and other issues are, so they're looking at it diligently. And then the RTA, RCTC Mobility Hub, the opportunity for Metrolink Station and other development within our downtown. So not to say that all the other things in the general plan implementation are not worthy, but, hey, it's planning, so this is what we said. So we're recommending tonight that the City Council approve the General Plan Progress Report as recommended by your Planning Commission, and direct staff to transmit the report to the state OPR and HCD. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. And thank you for indulging me in my very last presentation before you.
Sarah, was there anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this item? Does council have any remarks, questions, concerns?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, since I was on the GPEC committee before I got on council, and we started going through all of that, and I remember the 6-month limit that the city council had given us to have the new general plan back, and I think it took almost a year of 2 meetings a month for 4 hours at each one of the meetings. Deanna led us through the entire thing. We got it approved to be sent to the state from there, and got it approved at the state and back when I was on council, so I got to approve both sides of it. So, and I remember during that process, I remember the night we approved everything here.
Oh, yeah.
This T-shirt.
Yeah.
It says, thank God for the plan. And I've kept it all these years. Now, do you still have yours?
I do. My my family will not let me, repurpose it. So,
Very appropriate that on your last official day.
yes.
that-
I was hoping that those would all, eventually,
So I have one and I will keep it also.
Oh,
So, and I just want to say thank you to all of you who've done on this general plan. I mean, it was a Herculean effort to keep it going and to do the updates and the zonings and rezonings and implement all of the things that have been implemented in the 10 years you've been here.
well, thank you very much. I think we got it in good shape. It's all consistent with everything we could think of, so it's just those next items going forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else have any comments? Other than the fact that you've done a yeoman's job, and I know you tackled the most complex ones so far, and it's our duty and responsibility to make sure these other ones go through as well, or get work done and finished as well. But thank you for all your due diligence, for sure. Do we need I know that we've got a number of items yet. Do we need
We need to approve this,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So I will make a motion to approve the general plan progress report as presented and send it off to the OPR and the HCD.
And I'll second that. Please vote. Yes. Please vote. And that motion passes by 5-0. Thank you. Council, any issues going past 10 o'clock? Okay, so I need a motion from council to go past 10 o'clock.
So moved with some reluctance.
No, I need are you making that motion? Okay, do I have a second? Time limit of 11? Yeah, we need to be out of here by 11. Okay, please vote. Linda? Well, it wanted to say no. Oh, yeah. Yeah. That includes close. And that motion is approved by Sir. Thank you very much. Going on to the next item of business. Item number 23. Put all these things on one agenda. Fire prevention legislation, SB 1205. Chief Brown.
I promise brevity. I was given a direct order by the police chief to complete this in 30 seconds or less. I'll probably take a minute. Thank you, Madam. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to digest something that we will be bringing back to you here probably in early June. It does have significant policy ramifications that we'll have to work through. That is Senate Bill 1205, Fire Protection Services Inspections Compliance Reporting. And yes, this is a state mandate, unfortunately unavoidable, but really what this comes down to, it's going to require that every fire department or district report annually as to its administrating authority, which would be the city council, their compliance with annual inspection requirements under the California Health and Safety Code. Those deal with Group E occupancies, large family daycare, hotels, motels, lodging houses, apartment houses, and dwellings, Group R residential occupancies, and also those occupancies classified as high-rise jails and care facilities. We have approximately 100 of those in those categories that we'll be having to address. The immediate need to gain 100% compliance, we have been working with our CSG fire prevention partner to determine what that is going to look like in terms of their current contract. As you know, the policy decision was made several years ago to outsource that function. So within that, our current capacity, we're looking at how we can accomplish this, and I'll be coming back to you with that model, and then through resolution adopt support of this. This bill passed in September. Cal Chiefs, which is our legislative body, has been back and forth on its intent. Became very laser focused here the last couple of weeks, and that's why I'm bringing this to you. That executive summary gives you the big picture, and my intent will be back to you in June with what the plan looks like and how we hopefully are going to offset the cost. One of the things that will be involved is applying our fees to offset the cost of the inspection. That's one of the discussions that the interim city manager has been working on in terms of looking at our fee schedule. We need to update that. So those are all the things that play into it. But I wanted you to have this information, and certainly I'll be available for any questions with that.
Are there any members of the public that wish to speak on this item? Okay. Are there any questions or comments from City Council? Is this an information item?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next item, FY 2019-20 budget update, request for direction. Interim City Manager.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. Sir, did just pass out the presentation. You all did receive a copy of this presentation in your email, so you have it in paper form and you have it on PDF as well. So what I did was I've taken the bulk of the staff report that I included in the agenda backup, and I've created a presentation that touches on most of the key points of the staff report. I just wanted to read the first portion of the staff report aloud so that you all had that to just set the stage for where we're going with this. Hemet is at a critical juncture. Rising operational costs have placed a significant strain on the general fund. These costs include rising pension costs, rising other post-employment benefit costs, OPEB, and rising service demands on our city operations. While general fund revenues have seen significant gains since 2010, the last few years have shown relatively flat growth. While we are proud to see this revenue increase, unfortunately, expenditures over the same time frame have grown at a faster pace than the growth of revenues. So with that being said, the last time I was before you to talk about the budget was on March 27, 2019. We'll do a brief recap of what we talked there. At that time, I laid out the next steps for the budget process. I said that we were going to review all department expenditures. That has been completed. I also said that we were going to host departmental meetings with all of our operations. That has also been completed. Discussions about our capacity, those are ongoing with our departments. A solution to our budget deficit, that is ongoing, and part of that solution is the conversation we'll be having tonight. And additionally, I left you with the final slide at the last work study that talked about some policy questions. We'll be delving into some of those tonight as well. So some of the policy questions that we laid out at that March 27th work study included, does council wish to adjust its reserve policy? Does the council wish to revisit the allocations for Measure U for public safety in the general fund? Does the council wish to update its fees to reflect true costs of providing services? Does the council wish to adopt a policy of cost recovery for special events throughout the community? And finally, does the council wish to explore any other opportunities that align expenditures with revenues? So with that being said, what I've included here is a few revenue streams for the city of Hemet. The note at the bottom states that this is not exhaustive of all revenues, but it's merely a glimpse into some of the significant gains we have seen. Measure U revenues have been omitted from this table. So as you can see, property taxes from 2010 to 2018, over a $3 million gain in that time. Sales tax is one of the biggest increases that we've had in that time too, 7.7 to about 12.3. Franchise fees and other taxes, 1.5 to 5.4. The gains there primarily as a result of the refuse franchise agreement that the city did enter into during that time frame. And then finally, the transit occupancy tax, the TOT, you can see the gains from 2010 to 2018 in that time as well. So with that being said, there are some significant gains that have been made in the city of Hemet. We should be proud of those gains. It appears and the signs are indicating that we've seen some significant growth in that time frame that's been placed there. So that is very much to my happiness. I like seeing that. So in that time frame, what I've done is I've taken the operational costs for our departments from 2010 to 2018. I've highlighted the departments or the operations that had the most significant gains in that time. You can see that police, fire, parks, code enforcement, and engineering did have the biggest gains from that time. You can see that some operations did see a decrease. There are other operations that did have an increase as well. However, those haven't been highlighted because the proportion of increase for them wasn't nearly as high as the ones that were shown in yellow. Part of the reason for the expenditure increase in these departments that have to be absorbed by these departments include PERS increases, OPEB costs, operational costs, and public safety MOUs, primarily in the public safety operations. So I've included another table, some more information related to expenditures from 2010 to 2018. What I've included is the positions that are included for public safety as well as non-safety departments. And so you can see in the time that we've gone from 2010 to 2018, we haven't added any positions on the non-safety side. When we have had adjustments, we've deleted positions, we've made some adjustments within our departments to accommodate additional positions in that time. So there may have been fluctuations, in that time, but as of 2018, that's where we stand. You can see the police added about 5.2 positions in that time. I believe there was one sworn position and then the rest were non-sworn positions. And then in fire, you can see the decrease there as well. I was asked to include, we had a council member that asked about city attorney costs from 2010 to 2019. Through 2019, those have been included at the bottom section. I should note that city attorney costs, OPEB costs, and PERS costs are all built into each department. And so they're not singled out, they are absorbed by each department. You can see the table below in the middle. You can see where some of the biggest increases have happened and the impact that they've had to our operation. This is just the general fund component. You can see that in 2010, our OPEB costs were $1.4 million. And in 2018, they're $2.8 million. The item below is the PERS costs. In 2010, approximately $3.6 million. Fiscal year 18 actual, $7.4 million. So we've actually more than doubled that amount in that time frame. Total increase for that, or the total for those two line items in 2009 was $5.0 million, and then in 2018, $10.2 million. So those are significant gains in our operations as a result of just those two line items. So the next table before you is focusing primarily on public safety versus non-safety. The first table shows the 2009-2010 actuals, which were approximately $24.9 million. In fiscal year 17-18, that same combination of public safety was $31.8 million. The increase from 2010 to 2018 was approximately $6.9 million. For the non-safety operations, city council, city manager, HR, finance, so on and so forth, in 2010, fiscal year actuals were $7.6 million, and in fiscal year 2018, $10.2 million for an increase of $2.6 million over that time. So if we look at the increase of expenditures from 2009, fiscal year 2010, to fiscal year 2018, we've had an increase of $9.5 million in expenditures. And so of the $9.5 million that we've seen in the increase from 2010, 73% of that increase is in public safety. And of the $9.5 million increase from 2010 to 2018, 27% is from the non-safety operation of our operation. So this table, I believe I included in my budget workshop that that we hosted back in March, and it shows expenditures and revenues. And so the blue graph, the blue bar that you see, those are the expenditures. The red or the orange bar that you see is actually the revenues. And so when you have the blue that extends beyond the orange or the red, that's when your expenditures have outpaced or exceeded your revenues. And so in the time that we've included here, there's quite a number of things that have happened there, some negative, some positive. The dissolution of RDA happened in that time, so the work associated with that needed to be absorbed by city operations. The funding stream associated with that too disappeared. Public safety realignment, as it relates to state laws related to AB 109, Prop 47, Prop 57, those are having impacts on our operations. It's hamstringing our officers' ability to do their work out in the community. Additionally, there have been some retiree health adjustments over the course of that time to help reduce the OPEB liability on that side. And then finally, in that time, the city did implement tiered pension plans to help reduce the future pension obligations and liability for the city of Hemet. So the budget process so far, we reviewed all expenditures, and the way that we did that, and I should add that the Budget Ad Hoc Committee has been briefed on the process. At the bottom, we met in January, February, March, and we had 2 meetings in April. But the process so far, what we did was we took a 3-year historical context of actual expenditures in all of our departments, and we looked at year-to-date actuals. And so when we were doing this, we were in April, and so we knew that, I believe that was 9 months out of the year, so that we knew what proportion that they should be in terms of the expenditure amount for their operation. We reduced line items in the budget, and we added things in the budget as were needed because of a historical context of expenditures that actually wasn't in line with the budget that we currently have today. In the areas that our expenditures were lower than what they've been over the last 3 years, and year-to-date actuals were lower than what they should be as well, we made reductions in those line items as well. Mandatory increases have been included as it relates to PERS and some of those other items, contractual obligations. Simpson Center comes to my mind. Some of the other contracts that we have, software increases that we know that are going to increase, those have been programmed into the budget. Additionally, we also went through and we did a review of all of our revenues with our departments. So for the departments that have large revenue streams, community development, engineering, we went through those revenue streams and made adjustments as were needed based on actuals, based on historical context of what we've seen, and based on estimates of what we've received from our professional consultants as well. As I mentioned earlier, we have had a series of Budget Ad Hoc Committee meetings. I can't say that the April 30th meeting was a quick turnaround, so I appreciate the members of the committee setting time aside to get through those meetings, as well as the department heads that were included in that meeting as well. So I wanted to briefly touch on a couple of the major things that were included in the budget, as well as things that were not included in the budget. We have included a facilitator for strategic planning sessions with the council in the budget. We have included recruitment costs for a permanent city manager. We have included a budget allocation for Measure Z implementation. I know that there were a couple residents that mentioned that earlier today, so we've included professional consultants to help guide and steer the city through this process. We've included a classification and compensation study required as stated in the public safety MOUs. And finally, we've included cost increases for PERS. Things that we have not included, and I apologize, I can't read that. So I'll look at my PowerPoint. My fault. So things that were not included: cost of living adjustments for non-safety personnel, classification and compensation studies for non-safety personnel, replacement of telephone system. That's a system that is in dire need of replacement. An agenda management system has not been included in the budget. Private security for city library or city hall has not been included. Grant management or oversight services has not been included. Proactive mobile home inspection staff has not been included. Deanna mentioned this earlier. It's not included on the slide, but we have not included the citywide landscape design item in there either. And finally, we have not included an economic development strategy or marketing plan either. So the process so far, our initial deficit that we had was $5.2 million. In fiscal year 18-19, the initial deficit was $3.5 million. So budget balancing measures that we've already started to implement to reduce that $5.2 million is we are going to remove equipment replacement for fiscal year 19-20, approximately $500,000, and I apologize, I didn't include it here, but it is in the staff report. We are looking at one-time fund balances, including equipment replacement, facilities maintenance projects that have been carried over for a number of years that have not been completed. We are looking at those, and we will be having discussions with our department heads about those projects and looking at those to shore up that deficit. We anticipate that using a combination of those, we anticipate a savings of approximately $2 million to $2.5 million. Additional items that we have not included so far, but we will be exploring in the near term, include vacancy savings allocation. Last year there was a figure, a percentage of out of all departments that went into vacancy savings. We know that we have to budget for every single position July 1, and so we know that we're not going to have all those positions filled come July 1, and we know that all those positions aren't going to be filled come June 30th, 2020. And so we know that there's going to be natural attrition. We know that there's going to be a natural vacancy rate there. And so we have not plugged that in yet. Again, that will have another impact on our ability to chip away at that deficit. So here are the items that I am asking for council direction on. And these are the items that were included initially at the March 27th budget workshop. These are also included in the backup in your agenda packet. The first item that I will be talking about briefly is the use of Measure U funds above the $10 million mark to fund public safety and only public safety in the general fund. If that were to be, if the council were to direct us to do that, that would be approximately $1.2 million for fiscal year 19-20. The implementation time frame is short term because we can do that relatively quickly. Allocation of 72% of general fund revenues to public safety budgets. The overage of the 72% would be funded through Measure U. This item is largely rooted in Resolution 4731 and Resolution 4703. I did email those to you, so you should have those in your inbox as well. And that's where it states that at no time should the allocation of revenues allocated to the public safety departments should dip below 72%. I'll get into what that amount is currently at the next slide, but I wanted to make sure that you all have this before we get into that. Additionally, the lowering of the 20% reserve is something that the council could utilize to continue day-to-day operations here at the city of Hemet. It is a one-time revenue source. And the time to implement that is short to long term. If the council desires to continue lowering that reserve, then that becomes a longer term solution to the budget issues that we've experienced. And then lastly, the elimination of special events funding. That is an impact on the budget of approximately $50,000 plus. And again, that is short term. And I'll get into some of these details in the upcoming slides. additional budget balancing measures that are also part of this discussion that I would also like direction on. The exploration of outsourcing citywide maintenance of parks, streetscapes, and library. I should add that a bulk of these items have been included in the state audit. Those are lingering items that continue to be brought up by the state auditor. I had a conversation with the state audit folks last week, and they questioned what the progress was of the city and moving forward in some of the items that they had mentioned in their report. I am planning on going up to Sacramento and meeting face-to-face with the state audit folks and talking about some of the things that we've done in that time, as well as some next steps as it relates to potentially some of the direction I received today.
And Chris, when do you plan on that meeting?
In the next 2 weeks.
Next 2 weeks, thank you.
The exploration of OPEB costs to reduce future liability is something that is another item that is also listed in the state audit. A citywide organizational assessment to improve productivity and enhance efficiencies, again, part of the audit. Emergency medical service cost recovery, again, taken straight from the audit. These items are not included in the audit, but we can talk about it. A policy to prioritize CDBG funding for general fund obligations with the goal of offsetting expenses. If the council chose to have a policy that specified that the CDBG allocations were to offset general fund revenue or general fund expenses, we could certainly do that, but it is certainly not the current practice to utilize all of the funding for that. Update and complete fee service study to more accurately assess and recover costs for providing services. Again, in the staff report, I touch upon that the private sector, it's not uncommon for them to do this sometimes on a monthly basis. Update their costs for providing services. And then also update development impact fees. And then finally, any additional items from the state audit that the council wishes to explore. So I included the text of the narrative that was included in the staff report so that you all had some things to consider. I hope that you've had a chance to think about some of these items. And I wanted to talk about them briefly. The use of Measure U funds above the $10 million revenue mark to offset costs of public safety in the general fund and the allocation of 72% of general fund revenues to public safety budgets. The overage of the 72% would be funded through Measure U. So a couple of notes on that. Projections for Measure U revenue were initially calculated at $10 million. Actual revenues have trended at approximately $11.2 million. And so the additional revenue above the $10 million mark would be utilized to help offset public safety costs in the general fund and only public safety costs. Measure U revenues would not be used for non-safety costs in the general fund. Any use of Measure U funds will require a reworking of the Measure U plan, the collective input of council as well as the police and fire chiefs and members of the community is crucial to the development of a revised plan. On the right, the commentary on that is the council may want to consider a gradual decrease from general fund revenues to work its way down to the 72% mark over the course of a few years. The 72% figure is taken from Resolutions 4731 and 4703, which affirm the City Council's desire to expend Measure U revenues on public safety and ensures that no less than 72% of general fund revenues are appropriated for public safety operations. The table below illustrates the portion of revenues allocated to public safety since 2015. Again, any use of Measure U funds will be utilized solely for public safety costs in the general fund. So as you can see, in 2015, approximately 78.3 of our general fund revenues were allocated to public safety. The preliminary numbers that we have for this year are about 79.78, approximately 80% of your revenues, general fund revenues, will go towards funding public safety. The use of Measure U funds above the 10 million revenue mark to offset costs of public safety in the general fund and allocation of 72% of general fund revenues to public safety budgets. The overage of the 72% would be funded through Measure U. So what I've included for you here is if we were to have 72% of revenues allocated to public safety. The figure below that is what the amount would be funded in the public safety department. So if it was 72%, $29.2 million would be allocated to public safety. And then on the far side, 80% of your budget, which is approximately where we are at, that is $32.4 million total of expenditures. So if the council wished to allocate 76% of revenues to public safety, the Measure U offset would be approximately $1.6 million. And what I mean by that is currently the expenditure request for public safety is at approximately $32.4 million. So if we were to put it at 76%, the difference is between 32.4 and $30.8 million. That's how you get that $1.6 million. And then if you were to have it for 72%, the difference would be between 32.4% and 29.2%. So that's how I've just included an example for the council to see how that would work out. So the lowering of the 20% reserve, this is a less favorable option as it utilizes one-time revenues to balance ongoing expenditures. The city has utilized uncommitted fund balance above the 20% level to maintain ongoing existing expenditures. The latest CAFR shows a significant decline in the uncommitted fund balance above the 20% reserve since 2015. And the graph below illustrates this point. So in 2015, upwards of $8 million above the 20% reserve. And in the last CAFR that you all received tonight, it's approximately a little bit over $200,000 of the uncommitted fund balance above the 20% reserve. So that's the excess that you have above your 20% reserve. The elimination of special events funding. The special events program has two components. One is a direct grant to nonprofit organizations in the community, and the other is an in-kind service of personnel to help provide a level of service for events. The city incurs direct overtime as well as other costs that are not always captured in the in-kind allocation provided to groups. The overtime costs are absorbed by the departments, and with limited staffing creates operational issues within the organization. Oftentimes these events are on the weekends, and so we're having to pay for overtime for staff to come in and provide the service at these events. The current practice does not place an emphasis on cost recovery for the agency, which means the city bears the burden for providing these services. I should also mention that there is a community benefit that goes along with providing this service or this opportunity to the community. The next item, the state audit or exploration of outsourcing citywide maintenance of parks, streetscapes, or the library. The state auditor's office, and they have again voiced their concerns with the lack of follow-up aspects of their report. They have expressed concern, and they expressed this concern to me when I talked to them last week, that the consistent budget issues that we face and the gap between revenues and expenditures that the city currently experiences. What I've included in the image to the right is the last narrative that they provided to the city of Hemet. At that time, the city had provided a 5-year plan with respect to its revenues as a response to some of the concerns the state had. And I'll just read the first sentence that's included there. This is the response from the state audit. In our assessment of Hemet's May 2017 update, we stated that Hemet's 5-year plan did not accurately reflect its budget deficit because the plan did not incorporate revenues from its recently enacted sales tax increase, Measure U. Hemet subsequently revised its budget to incorporate Measure U revenue and expenditures. However, this presentation is misleading because it does not accurately reflect how the city plans to spend the additional revenue generated by Measure U. So one of the last sentences that they included there, because Measure U funds will not be available to support any type of general fund expenditures, including police and fire, it should not be factored in determining whether Hemet's general fund revenues will exceed expenditures. If Measure U revenues and expenditures are excluded from the general fund budget, Hemet's projections will show that its expenditures exceed its revenues. A couple more slides. The organizational assessment to improve productivity and enhance efficiencies. The state audit noted the areas that warranted exploration for operational efficiencies. These are noted in the audit, and some have been talked about in the past, but it may warrant additional discussion as the items noted are still problematic. These include the library, code enforcement, and restructuring the city organization. A policy to prioritize CDBG funding for general fund obligations with the goal of offsetting expenses. The city has provided social service groups a portion of its CDBG allocation. While not mandated or required by law, the city is able to provide CDBG allocations to service groups in the community with the intent of accomplishing various noteworthy goals. The council could decide to utilize the funding allocated for social service groups and instead be utilized for general fund obligations, including those in engineering and community development departments. This would have impacts to the community, but the council could choose to adopt a policy and then give the organizations that would be impacted significant time to explore alternative funding sources. City staff would need to develop a policy, bring forward to council, and also explore the areas in which the city could utilize the CDBG allocations for other eligible projects with the goal of offsetting general fund expenditures. Update and complete fee service study to more accurately assess and recover costs for providing services. Pursuant to the provisions of the California Constitution, the city is authorized to adopt and implement fees, rates, and charges for services provided, that such fees, rates, and charges do not exceed the estimated reasonable cost of providing those services. Reviewing our fee structure is necessary to determine the true cost of providing services to the community. And just a brief note on development impact fees. When new or proposed developments are proposed in a community, the idea behind the impact fees is to pay for all or a portion of the cost of providing public services to the new development. So with that being said, I am asking for direction on the items that were before you. So I'd be happy to field any questions or comments and would open it up to discussion as the council so desires.
Sarah, was anybody that wanted to speak on this item? Okay. Council questions? Pardon?
She's yelling from the audience.
Okay, I'm going to talk real quick. First of all, this presentation was awesome. However, giving it at 11:15 is very cruel to us who have to take all this in. But here's a couple points. One, you give me a red pen and you give me an itemized budget, I will balance your budget. The mindset that the city council has for 8 years that you can continually work at a deficit is wrong. You got to get that out of your heads. And finally, the issues about Measure U, I thought they were presented brilliantly here, but I remember last year these same comments were brought and people were basically crucified for suggesting that Measure U money be used for anything other than the definition of Measure U. So I'm just a little bit concerned that we don't have another city manager removal because of this particular suggestion, which I think is great. But you can't have another deficit. You got to stop it. You got to.
Council?
I'll start. I absolutely agree with several of the points to consider. Absolutely, we need to be taking a very close look at fees for services, not only to update them to the true cost, but examining every feasible cost that we might be able to recover that we might not be currently doing. And I'm not advocating that we're not doing that, but I think we just need to make sure that anything that is reasonable and legitimate to create a fee for cost recovery, we should be doing that. That in and of itself is probably going to generate a small amount, but every little bit helps. I certainly recall